What if the most painful experiences of your life were not accidents? What if the loneliness, the rejection, the constant sense that something about this world just does not add up, what if all of that was actually the beginning of something enormous? Stay with me until the end of this video, because I'm going to share something that most people will never hear, and it changes everything about how you understand your own story. There is an ancient idea, older than most religions as we know them today, that certain people are born into this world already carrying a kind of inner knowing. Not a knowing they were taught. Not something they picked up in school or from their parents. A knowing that seems to pulse from somewhere deeper than memory. These people have been called many things throughout history. Mystics called them seekers. Philosophers called them the awakened. Ancient Gnostic traditions had a specific term for what they experienced, and that experience began not with triumph, not with power, but with pain. It began in childhood. It began with feeling completely and utterly wrong. Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this question honestly. Did you ever feel, as a child, like you had arrived in the wrong place? Like everyone around you was operating according to a script you had never been given? Like the things that were supposed to make you happy, the games, the social rituals, the approval seeking, the performance of normalcy, like none of it actually touched whatever was living inside you? If your answer is yes, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not broken. Because here is what I want to talk about today. The Gnostic tradition, particularly as it was understood by early mystical communities and later rediscovered through texts like the Nag Hammadi library, proposed something radical. It proposed that this world, the one we see and touch and navigate every day, is not the full story. In fact, they argued it was something closer to a constructed reality, a kind of cosmic system built to keep human consciousness occupied, distracted, and small. And the people who sensed that something was off? The ones who could not shake the feeling of displacement? Those people were not malfunctioning. They were waking up. This video is going to walk you through 4 acts of what I am calling the Gnostic war against illusion. And I promise you, by the time we reach the final act, you are going to see your own life completely differently. But before we get there, I need you to do something for me. If anything in the first few minutes of this video has already started something moving inside you, hit the like button right now. Share this with someone you know who has always felt like an outsider. Because those people need to hear this today. Act 1. The outsider. Picture a child who feels too much. A child who watches people interact and senses layers beneath the surface that nobody else seems to acknowledge. A child who asks questions that make adults uncomfortable. Why do people say things they do not mean? Why does everyone pretend to be happy when they clearly are not? Why does school feel like a performance? Why does fitting in feel like slowly disappearing? This child is often labeled as too sensitive. Too intense. Too much. They get told to toughen up. They get told they are overthinking. They develop a particular kind of loneliness that is different from ordinary loneliness, because it is not just about being without friends. It is a metaphysical loneliness. A sense of being separated from some deeper home that they cannot even name. In Gnostic cosmology, there is a concept called the divine spark. The idea is that within certain people, there exists a fragment of authentic divine consciousness that has been placed inside a world that is fundamentally alien to it. The material world, according to this view, is not the creation of the highest divine source. It is the creation of something lower, something that the Gnostics called the demiurge, a kind of architect of limitation who built a system designed to keep that inner spark trapped and unconscious. Now I am not asking you to take that literally as a theological claim. What I am asking you to consider is this as a psychological map. Because whether you interpret it literally or metaphorically, the description fits something that millions of people have actually lived. That feeling of being a stranger in a strange land. That sense that the rules everyone else seems to accept without question feel hollow and constructed to you. That quiet but relentless inner voice that says there is something more than this. The outsider child who grows up feeling different is not experiencing a disorder. According to this ancient framework, and honestly according to a great deal of modern psychological research on sensitivity and giftedness, that child is experiencing the first stage of a much larger journey. The friction is real. The rejection is real. The pain of not belonging is absolutely real. But it is also, in ways you may not yet fully understand, a preparation. Act 2. The fracture. If childhood is the quiet accumulation of difference, then the fracture is when the pressure finally breaks something open. The fracture is that moment, or that period, when life as you had learned to navigate it stops working entirely. It might look like a betrayal so complete that you no longer know who you are. It might look like a relationship that collapses and takes your entire identity with it. It might look like a career achievement that should have felt like a rival but instead felt completely empty. It might look like an illness, a loss, a crisis of faith, a period of such profound isolation that you could not recognize yourself in the mirror. The fracture is not a failure. But while you are living through it, it feels like one. It feels like everything you built is burning and you cannot stop the fire and you do not even know if you want to. In Gnostic thinking, this moment has a name. It is the moment of recognition. It is the moment when the constructed self, the self that was assembled to survive in a world that felt foreign, finally cracks under its own weight. The mask breaks. The performance ends. And beneath it, something raw and terrifying and real begins to surface. This is the part of the story that most personal development content skips over because it is not comfortable. It is not inspiring in the traditional sense. Nobody wants to make a highlight reel of their fracture. But here is the truth that I need you to hear, and this is important, so I want you to really sit with this. The fracture is the most important thing that will ever happen to you. Not because suffering is good. Not because pain is noble. But because without it, you never stop performing. Without the fracture, the mask never comes off. And the mask is exactly what the system wants you to keep wearing. If you are in a fracture right now, if you are in that place of collapse and confusion and grief, I need you to subscribe to this channel, because what comes next in this conversation is going to matter enormously to where you are headed. And leave a comment below. Tell me where you are in this journey. Because you are not watching this video by accident. Act 3. Gnosis. Gnosis is a Greek word that means direct experiential knowledge. Not belief. Not faith in someone else's testimony. Not intellectual understanding acquired from a book. Gnosis is the knowing that lands in your body when you see something true for the first time. The kind of knowing that cannot be unfelt once it arrives. After the fracture, if you do not run from it, if you resist the very human impulse to numb it or escape it or rebuild the old mask as quickly as possible, something begins to shift. You start to see through things. You start to notice the machinery behind the curtain. The social performances that everyone participates in begin to look different. The narratives you were handed about success and belonging and worth start to feel like what they are, which is stories. Powerful stories. Stories with real consequences. But stories nonetheless. This is the beginning of seeing through illusion. And it is both liberating and deeply disorienting at the same time. Because when you start to see through the constructed nature of the world around you, you also have to reckon with the constructed nature of yourself. You have to ask which parts of you are genuinely yours, and which parts were assembled in service of survival and acceptance and the management of other people's comfort. The Gnostic teachers spoke about this process as the recovery of the authentic self. The divine spark, buried under layers of conditioning and fear and social performance, begins to reassert itself. And this process is not gentle. It requires a kind of ruthless honesty that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It requires looking at the stories you have told about yourself and asking whether they are true or whether they were simply useful. It requires sitting with the difference between who you were taught to be and who you actually are. There is a word in Gnostic literature, archons, which refers to the forces that maintain the constructed reality, the powers that keep consciousness distracted and domesticated. Again, take that literally or metaphorically, but notice how precisely it describes something we all actually navigate. The voice in your head that says you are not enough. The cultural noise that tells you your worth is tied to your productivity. The relational dynamics that punish honesty and reward performance. These are the archons of everyday life. And Gnosis is the moment you see them for what they are. Seeing through illusion does not mean becoming cynical. This is a critical distinction. Cynicism is just disappointment that decided to stop trying. Gnosis is something fundamentally different. It is a clear-eyed recognition of what is real, combined with an unshakable commitment to living from that reality. It is seeing the game and choosing not to be defined by it. It is reclaiming your own perception as the ground you stand on, rather than outsourcing your reality to the consensus of people who have not yet had their own fracture. Reclaiming authenticity in this context means something specific. It means that the sensitivity you were punished for as a child becomes your greatest precision instrument. It means that the questions you were told to stop asking become the questions that guide your entire life. It means that the outsider experience, all that painful, bewildering displacement, was actually training you to see what comfortable insiders cannot see. Act 4. Transformation. Here is where most stories like this end. Person suffers. Person awakens. Person becomes enlightened. Credits roll. But I want to push further than that, because the Gnostic tradition was never just about personal enlightenment as a destination. It was about what happens when the people who have truly seen through the illusion choose to do something with that seeing. It was about transformation as responsibility. The people who come through the outsider childhood and survive the fracture and genuinely arrive at Gnosis do not typically want to retreat from the world. Contrary to what you might expect, they tend to feel a pull back toward it. Not the false version, not the performance, but the real human beings living inside the system who are still suffering, still confused, still wondering why they feel so wrong in a world that insists they should feel fine. This is the emergence of purpose. And it is not the kind of purpose that gets printed on motivational posters. It is something considerably more demanding and considerably more alive. It is the purpose that emerges when you stop asking what the world wants from you and start asking what you are uniquely equipped to offer. When the wounds of the outsider become the source of your deepest competency. When the fracture becomes the door through which other people can find their own way through. Leadership in this context does not mean title or position or authority in the traditional sense. It means becoming someone whose clarity is contagious. Someone who creates containers, whether that is art, writing, conversation, community, therapy, teaching, building, whatever the medium is, where other people can encounter their own truth more directly. The Gnostic leaders of history were not kings. They were the people who quietly transmitted something real in the midst of a world running on something constructed. Creation becomes an act of liberation in this framework. When you make something from the authentic place you uncovered on the other side of the fracture, you are not just expressing yourself. You are introducing something real into a world that is starving for reality. Every person who encounters that thing you made, that idea you voiced, that space you held, has an opportunity for their own recognition, their own first tremor of Gnosis. And the catalyst, which is what the truly transformed become, is not someone who hands other people answers. It is someone whose presence and work creates the conditions for other people to find their own. Because Gnosis cannot be transferred. It can only be sparked. Now here is the caveat I promised you at the beginning. The one I told you to stay until the end to hear. And I need you to understand that this is not a footnote. This is perhaps the most important thing in the entire video. Transformation of the kind I have been describing is not a destination. It is not a credential you earn once and then possess forever. The person who has genuinely gone through the outsider experience, survived the fracture, arrived at Gnosis, and begun to live from that place of purpose and creation is not immune to the illusion. They are more capable of seeing it, yes. But they are also now capable of building new illusions, subtle ones, sophisticated ones, illusions dressed in the language of awakening. The Gnostic war against illusion is a war that never fully ends. Because the most dangerous constructions are not the crude ones. They are the ones that look like truth. The spiritual ego that replaces the social ego. The awakening identity that becomes its own performance. The chosen one narrative, which I have deliberately used as the lens for this entire video, that can quietly become a prison disguised as a crown. The real transformation is not becoming someone who has escaped the illusion. It is becoming someone who remains vigilant against it, permanently, even, especially, within themselves. The chosen ones in the most honest Gnostic sense are not chosen because they are superior. They are chosen because they cannot stop seeing, and they have accepted the ongoing cost and the ongoing responsibility of that sight. Your outsider childhood was real. Your fracture mattered. Your Gnosis is yours. Your purpose is genuine. And you will need to fight for all of it, not once, but every single day. That is not a warning to discourage you. That is the actual shape of a life lived in real wakefulness. If this video reached something in you, share it. Someone in your life is in their fracture right now and they need this framework. Subscribe because we are going to keep going deeper into these ideas in ways that most channels will never touch. And drop a comment below telling me which act of this story you are currently living. The outsider. The fracture. The Gnosis. Or the transformation. I want to know where you are. Because this conversation is just beginning.